Hey everyone, welcome to Sugar Melts. So I've been meaning to do this video, and today I'm giving away this journal to a girlfriend of mine, and so I thought, well, I better get started on this video or you're never going to see this. So I'm going to show you some of the fundamentals about making a handmade journal using a lot of the supplies you probably already have: paper, stamps, washi tape, etc. And then a few other things that I use. So if this is a project you're interested in, I'll show you the tools that I use so you can get those collected. And I'll be probably doing this over 3 to 4 videos so that it's not this long, intense one, but we'll just get started today. So this journal that I recently made for my girlfriend, because she's visiting, and with COVID I haven't been able to see her for over a year. So I've got this tie here. I secured it to the back with this little button that I purchased. These are the signatures that are bound in here, and when you open it up, here's the different layout for the different pages. Each page has its own unique, just stamping. I wanted it to be a thicker paper than just regular notebook paper, and so I'm using actually cardstock, but I didn't like the finished edges, so I used my a Tim Holtz tool to distress the edges and give them a rougher way to do that. There's lots of different ways to do that. We'll talk about those. So there's actually 3 signatures in here. There's the end of one of them. So you can see here, just they're tied in here in the center with the binding. We'll talk about how to do that. So this should give her plenty of to journal, or whether she needs to if she's like me, and lots of to-do lists and shopping lists. And there's lots of journals out there. Some of them are quite embellished. I like to sometimes have a little cover to protect the pages on the end. I use my journals a lot, so I make them portable. I don't put a lot on the outside because otherwise I'm worried they'll get a little too banged up in my handbag or my car. So I keep them kind of simple, but you can certainly embellish a lot and make them really fancy and pretty. So anyways, let's get started with some of the fundamentals about how to do this, okay? Okay, I'm going to set this aside for a second. Okay, so when I make journals, there's different ways that you can do the back. You can use these hanging folders and cut them down, because on a hanging folder or a file folder, not this one in particular, but this one here, you can probably see there's this folds that are already in here, so we can utilize those to give it that spine that it needs for your signatures. And you can use all 3, you can use 2, but they're pretty easy just to kind of fold on back there. And then all of a sudden you've got the makings already of a little journal. So you can use file folders, and of course you can use your tools that you already have to create an extra seam for your backing, so you don't need those. You can use the other thing that I like to use a lot. Let me show you. When you get your big packets of 12 by 12 paper, they always come with this cardboard in the back. And I love to cut this down into a front, a back, and then a seam in the middle. Give a little bit of space in between, and then all of a sudden you've got, again, your journal cover. So lots of different things. I've seen people use cereal boxes. I mean, you can just use anything to give it just a little more stiffness. You can even go to a used bookstore and pull out a book, and I've done that before, where I've cut out the inside. Let me see, I started one a while ago. I don't know if I still have it here. Oh, looks like I do. So this is another one that I was working on. Guess I've done 2 of them now. But I cut out I used a knife and I cut out the kind of the guts of the book. So they look like this. It comes out in one nice piece. And then I've still got the rest of the book that I can use for any other project. And then I can either put paper or fabric on the outside. And then I've got a nice stiff cover there. So lots of different ways to do that. Okay. When you're making your journal, this is my little trusty box here. I keep things all together simply because I only use them for the journals. I don't use them for my other projects. A lot of the buttons that I like to use are in here. I like, let's see, where does this one open at here? I like a button that's got, sorry, it's a little early in the morning for me. See if you can see that. It's only got the one hole through the back, and then I can thread. It's usually that way a larger hole. You can either thread that fabric through, or if you have one with holes in the top, you can wrap it around there. So there's different ways to use the securing device. I just happen to like to use different buttons for that. This little bag I picked up. The other thing that's probably going to be really helpful for you will be this tool here. With this tool, when I'm making the journal, it's what I use to make the holes in the back. And these things, oh my gosh, they go through the paper signatures and then through the backing. And when you're using things like cardboard, you need a really good, precise tool that can get all the way in and without spending a lot of money. And if you're using a hole punch, it can be difficult to get all the way in. So this is a really nice, precise tool. These little binder clips, these help hold those signatures in place because when you're laying that paper out, you're not going to want it to shift a lot. So I pick up about 4 of these. So when we get to that video, you're ready to go. And then I use this... I don't know if there's a special name for this kind of thread, but it is for binding books, and it's wax based. It's really durable, nice and thick, and that's what I thread the signatures through. Some people just do glue, some people just do tear tape, but that's the way I use it. And this little kit that I had bought when I first started, I started just to practice to see if I liked it, and it was nice enough that I've never needed to, you know, upgrade anything. But it also came with these needles, and they have a really big opening, so this thick, heavy thread goes through, and it's a nice wide needle that opens up that paper hole that you've made so that everything can go through nice and smoothly. It's not labor intensive to get all this put together. You will need a ruler. It won't need to be a big ruler. You may be wondering, why would I only need 6 inches? Well, when you're putting your paper together in your journal, one of the limitations you may have, and I'll get it here to show you, if you're using standard paper, whether it's cardstock, whether it's note paper, we'll probably tea dye or coffee dye this paper. But when you fold it, I mean, that's your limitation for the size of your journal for most journals. And of course, you can trim this down and make it smaller, but it does get a little trickier to make it larger. You then need larger paper. So just have that in the back of your mind when you're thinking about some tools that you may want to pick up along the way, or, you know, get organized, put together, or set aside if you want to make a journal with me. Okay, let me put this aside. Tear tape is always really great to have for, you know, everything in life, I think. I think it's just such a great product. So pick up some tear tape or have that around. I have different sizes, and so depending on what I'm doing in the project, I may use my 1/2 inch, my 1/4 inch, and I've even got my 1/8 of an inch around here that I've been using a lot of lately. For securing the paper to the binder, because you want it really seamless, this isn't like just a card with it's going to be sitting to the side. You really want this to be secured. I use a paintbrush, and I've used different glues. I don't think I have one that I love the most, so find one that works for you. If you want to gesso the outside or put Mod Podge on the outside, certainly you can do that. I've done that in the past. I did not on this one, but you can. It just depends on where we end up going with this. And I never know. I never know where I'm going to end up when I start a project. So let's go ahead and do some trimming here and get started on this little project. So I've got a file folder here, just one that I'm, not going to use again. And I just figure, well, I'll just go ahead and make a journal out of it. So now, since I've already folded this back, this is where I've gotten in trouble before, because I'll go ahead and trim this down and then I'll fold this back and all of a sudden my edges on this side don't line up. So I do that all the time. Just so we know this. Okay, so when you think about your 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, so let me go ahead and just fold this down so I've got kind of a template of where I'm going. Doesn't have to be exact yet. So that's really the limitations, as you can see, of what we're talking about, okay? So I usually first start out with just chopping off this stuff at the end here. Now, some people like to keep these. I usually don't for the outside. You can, or you can use them later in the inside for signatures. Again, this is a really creative process. So this piece here measures out at about 5.5 because that's the 11 side. So I'm going to go ahead and trim this down to, let's just go in this moment to 6 inches. Oh, but then I'm going to lose it on this end, aren't I? Oh, see, there I go. I've already folded it back. So I'm just going to do it like this then. And I'll hold it up, keep this end out, and I'll just trim it this way, and then I'll flip it over. That'll be easier. The thing to remember also when you're working with these file folders, these are just, mostly designed for offices, office work, business offices. So they're not exact in their measurements. You will find them off by 1/8 of an inch or sometimes even a little more. And when you're putting something in a file folder for work, that 1/8 of an inch may be irrelevant. But if you're trying to do something creative, you may want it more specific. So another reason to be really careful in your measurements, knowing that this item is not as exact as what we usually do. Okay, so I've got that lined up to the 6. Let me get that out of the way. Okay. And then I want to trim this side down. So this side won't be impacted by that seam. And again, if it's looking like this, our measurement comes out to 8.5. And that would be the largest that this would be. So I'll go ahead and in this moment, I'm going to go ahead and put it to about 9 inches. You can always trim it more later. Okay, so then you've got these pieces that you can keep or throw away or use for scrap. Just get that out of the way. Okay. Now for decorating the outside. So what I like to do, and you can use fabric, you can use pieces of paper, scraps of paper. I find it easy to use a large sheet of, a 12 by 12 piece of paper. Now, a couple of years ago, I was trying to save space, and this was before I was making journals. And a lot of people online were recommending cutting your paper down. So I had taken my 12 by 12 paper and I had cut it all in half to make it 6 by 12. And then it was easier to store. Well, then I started making the journals and the 6 was not big enough because there's the seam you can see. And I wasn't really sure how to fix this problem, that it was pretty enough. And so some of my journals were a little smaller because I was working with half of this paper. And then I was watching a video the other night and she just took that little 1/8 of an inch of tear tape and put it right, I found it best to put it on the pretty side of the paper. Line them up where you cut it so you know which is which, what I mean, to make the pattern come together. Put that 1/8 of an inch right on the edge and then secure them exactly. So look, you can't even really feel where they came together. So that's nice and flush. So then I was thinking, well, okay, so now I've got my 12 by 12 back and I want to put it on this. Oh, see, look, it's not going to be big enough, right? So I'm going to trim this down just a little bit more. But one thing I want to point out is, I don't know if you can see it here, but I can see the seam where I tape them together. Well, I don't want that to run right through the middle of my entire journal. So what I'm going to do is have it go down the seam, okay? So with the seam, it's going to be a lot easier to protect it, to keep it, because it is a weaker spot. It's been cut before. I'll have the signatures secured there. I can put a piece of lace, another piece of paper. I can do some things to protect that vulnerable area here. Okay, so if this is, let's see, 12 by 12, and then this comes out at 12 and a half. Okay, so we're going to trim this down just a little bit more to make it easier. Okay, so I want this to come in. See, now I can do it right here. What about coming down to, so let's see here. If I'm at 12 and a half, and if I come down to, so I'm going to want these two sides to be the same. Let's just go ahead and cut this. Just cut that piece off, and I'll measure this out now. So what did I cut that down to? So that left me right at 5. Okay, so that's easy. So then I'm going to do this side and cut this right at the seam now. So let's get over to the seam. There's 5. Pull that top flap out. Trim it down, and there they match. Now this looks a little long, so I'm going to want to shorten it, I think. Okay, so that's at 5. So right now it's at 5 by 9. How about a 5 by 7? That looks like, or 5 by 7.5. That looks like a nice size journal, don't you think? Maybe 5 by 7.5. Okay, what do you think? Oh, that looks pretty. I like that size. That's nice. Okay, perfect. So we've got a size. So, yes, this is my usual process. This is why I thought this video is going to take 3 or 4 times, 3 or 4 episodes for me to get this journal done. Now you can see why. Okay, so now there we go. See, that fits perfectly. Okay, the next step to gluing this on here and making it nice and secure. So I've got a couple more. Let's see if I've got here. I don't know if you have one of these tools. Between this and my bone folder, these make it really nice to make sure that when you glue this down, that it's perfectly smooth and not warped or bubbly. If it is, if you glue it down and you find some creases or dampness, or if it tears because you're using a thinner paper, again, all these things can be corrected. We can embellish over it. We can put the wrap around it. We can do different things. So that's certainly not a fatal issue. If you want your corners rounded, which I frequently do, I believe I did that on my journal that I'm giving to my girlfriend, I do that after I put the paper down, because why do it twice, right? Okay, so to put the glue down, there's different ways to do that. You can either use all these pages you get in the newspaper, and most of us probably just throw them away. These are great projects, great time to use these pages. I like to look for one that opens up, and there you see, that's what I'm talking about there. That nice big page. Okay, so you can either do it this way, or if you have one of these, this is a great time to bring this out. These are these rubber mats. This one's pretty trashed right now. I need to wash it. But nothing stains it. Nothing gets stuck to it. So when you use glue or that those Brush-O powders or paint, they're a great covering for your base work surface because they are waterproof and stain proof. You just have to actually wash them once in a while. So you can do either way, but if you've got one of these stashed away, there's different brands. I've got a couple brands. This is a great project to bring them out on, because the glue, you will be able to get the glue off of it easier than if you're trying to do it on your regular work surface. You may not be happy with that outcome. Okay, so couple ways to do this. You can either put the glue onto your paper first or onto this surface first. I will probably put it onto this surface and then secure the paper onto it. So let me I'm going to get another sheet of paper under here. Let's see if I can find one that opens up the way I like it. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay. So, open that up, and so the glue that I'm going to be using today is just this, the art glitter glue. Many of you probably have that. It does take a bit of glue, and use there's different paint brushes, whatever you have. Just be sure to use a really soft one. It's not quite as imperative if you're putting the glue onto the file folder, but if you're putting your glue on your paper first, because of whatever scenario you're looking at, this paper gets saturated pretty fast with a lot of glue. So the softest paintbrush you have will protect your paper from tearing. Oh, that's sad when your paper tears. It really is. So let me go ahead here, and hopefully this is actually going to be opened, and we'll go ahead, and here we go. We're just going to go ahead, and I'm going to start putting this glue down. And I do use a fair amount because I want it to be nice and sealed in this situation here. Doesn't have to be a fancy glue, and we're not we're just securing paper to cardboard basically. So let's see if that's kind of enough. So let's just get this all secured. Now I don't have enough on here because I think I want it more to the edges. Okay, let's go ahead, and you'll want to get your paintbrushes back into water pretty fast after all of this so you don't destroy them. And as everybody's probably already told you, if you do though, Dollar Tree's got pretty nice selection for these kinds of projects. Been really, really happy with all of their selection lately. Sorry about the camera shaking. I'm not sure what just caused that. Okay, so one last little bit around the edges here so it's sealed right to the edge. Ready? Okay, so you just get that secured down. Okay, so now I've got my paper, found my seam. There's my seam. Okay, and so I can keep an eye on that. It's easier in this light to see it upside down, and I can line up my seam with the seam on the back of this file folder. So I can go right in between those two and smooth that across. There we go. You certainly can cut your paper down first if you want to. I'm not sure if there's really a preference. Maybe I should have done that. I don't know. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I just trim it back afterwards. Some folks like to leave a nice wide band around and then fold it over. I usually don't do that. I use different paper on the inside. That way I'm just making it pretty, I think. So lots of different paper to make it all kind of come together. Okay, so now you can see it's nice and secured. We could always go back and put a little more glue in if we want to later or someplace, or seal it differently. And then we can just trim down the edges. Okay, just let that kind of sit for a second. Okay, I didn't get too much glue on that paper. I'm gonna keep that around. Let me get my paintbrush into some water real fast. Okay, that's soaking just so it doesn't dry on there. And then my glue, let me get my glue capped. And then we can trim this down and see that we've already got the start of another journal. How exciting is that? So what I do is I just bring it over right about to the edge there and trim it down. And it may not be quite exact, but we'll get there. You can always go back with scissors too, but I just love this cutting that I have so much. It's just my favorite tool here. There we go. So trim that down. And then I'll do this side. And then we'll be able to go back and do the final touches. And this one's right at the edge, so here we go. Sorry if my head's in the camera. Look at that. It's coming down pretty perfect. So we'll go back and just trim that up a little bit with some scissors. And not sure what you all have for scissors for these projects. I think it's really helpful to have really nice sharp scissors. So see, this just comes off nice and easy. There we go. Okay. Do that. And then we're going to fold. So we've got this nice and smooth. You can see that's just about as smooth as it's going to get. You can keep going over because it's not totally dry yet. You don't want too much glue or it'll bubble, but you want enough to make sure that it sticks. So it's kind of a balance. Now, as I said, some folks like to fold over the edges. I generally don't. I like mine to look a little more rustic. So what I generally do is I'll just keep trimming this down till it's right on the edge, and I'll be able to see that edge. And then what I'm going to go back through and do is either sponge it, or I'll use a coordinating marker and I'll just color that edge. So it'll give it that kind of a look. So I'm going to go through here with my bone folder. And I didn't have to do anything here, you know, because the folds were already there. And I've got now the base of my journal. And I can decide which side I want to be the cover. Well, I'm probably going to use this side because I love that red. Okay, so there's the start of our journal. In our next video, part 2, we will talk about putting stuff on the inside, making the signatures, the paper, how to do that, your different choices with that. And then we'll just keep going, okay? Hey, have a great weekend, folks, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.